not very important. I don't read very often.
Actually, very important. I've always been an avid reader.
You learn a lot. You learn a lot. You can be educational, or it can even be like stuff about life. You know, you can get something positive from every book, right?
As a student, it's pretty important. I think it's good to develop reading and writing skills, especially since I'm minoring in English. So yeah, it's pretty important to me.
Reading for me as important as food and drink. In the Quran, the first command that came to Muhammad, the first command, even many Muslims do not recognize this, was read.
And the J.
All right, Faye and the J.
And you stay safe, we can play.
The Leftovers.
Was The Omnivore's Dilemma. It was good.
The last book I read was Lord of the Flies. I reread Lord of the Flies.
It would be a textbook from school.
The last book I read was James Patterson.
The Bible.
The Bible.
Welcome to Everyday Grace TV, where there is story, there is grace. I'm Mary Andrioli.
And I'm Jay Locklear. And on this exciting episode of Everyday Grace TV, we're exploring literacy in celebration of School Library Month.
We asked our Everyday Grace TV team to go out onto the streets of North Carolina and ask two questions. What was the last book you read, and how is reading important to you? So Jay, I want to ask you, how is reading important to you in your life?
Reading is very important to me. Most of what I've learned and some of the work that I do, I'm self-taught. So if I need to figure something out, I'll read. I'll look something up on the internet, or I'll go buy a book or borrow a book from somebody else. So reading is something that I do probably every day, and just trying to figure things out. How about for you? Is reading important for you?
Reading is very important for me. I have a particular fondness for books, and I bought some of the ones that I've been reading, working on. This is the last book that I read. It's called How to Be Happy by Eleanor Davis, and it is a wonderful graphic novel. And then a friend of mine recommended Chronicles of Narnia that I'm working on, and also another graphic novel. What was the last book that you read, Jay?
Last book that I read is called The War of Art. It's by an author named Stephen Pressfield, and in it he writes about how to break through creative blocks. He talks about resistance, gives it a capital R, almost personifies it in a way. So it's a pretty interesting book. It's not a long read, it's pretty short, but it's a good book.
Are you going to loan it to me?
After I write my name on it and extract a signed contract from you that says that I'll get it back.
You might need that. Will you introduce our guests for us?
I will do that. Today we've got guests from two literacy programs, one based in Cary called Read and Feed. Joining us from there will be Ashley Graney. And then from Fayetteville Urban Ministries Adult Literacy Project, we'll have Risa Cheney and Alice Bull.
If you would like to respond to the questions that we're asking on the show today, please follow us on Twitter at Everyday Grace TV or like our Facebook page. Next up, we'll spend some time with Ashley Graney of Read and Feed. Welcome back to Everyday Grace TV, where we are speaking with Risa Cheney and Alice Bull from Fayetteville Urban Ministry. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. Why don't we go ahead and start out this particular part of the show by asking you both, how important is reading to you in your daily life? Risa?
Reading is very important to me in my daily life. The first thing that I read every day is the Fayetteville Observer, our daily newspaper. I read all kinds of things, and one of the biggest pleasures in my day is being able to be at Fayetteville Urban Ministry and share reading with those who've had a little bit of a struggle with it.
Thank you for sharing. Alice, will you tell me, what's the last book that you read?
Well, I love mysteries. And the last one I read was by a North Carolina author, Margaret Maron, and it was called Christmas Morning. M-O-U-R-I-N-N-I-N-G.
Very good. Well, let's talk a little bit about how you both came to be volunteers with Fayetteville Urban Ministry.
I became involved with the program the year that my youngest child was off to college. My husband was away with the military, and I just found myself with a lot of extra time on my hands. And I was reading the paper one day, and Fayetteville Urban Ministry had an ad in the paper that said they needed tutors. They needed reading tutors, and I called the number, went by to visit, and was signed up for training not long after that, and I have been there with the program since 2006.
Oh goodness, how about you, Alice?
Well, after I retired, I wanted a service opportunity of some sort. I feel like it's important to give back.
Absolutely.
And I saw a flyer in our church's parish hall, and I called, and I did the same thing Risa did. I took the training, and I was assigned a student pretty soon after that.
Wonderful. So can you help us to understand, I've been calling the issue of literacy a bit of a crisis, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the statistics associated with literacy in North Carolina.
We can share some of the statistics. Pro-Literacy, which is a national organization that fosters reading and helping those who can't, their statistics tell us that 24% of the people here in North Carolina read below the 5th grade level.
Oh goodness, okay.
Some of them are able to read basics, but as far as comprehending and being able to function with their reading is a struggle for many people.
Okay.
And to make it worse, Mary, 19% of our high school graduates read below the 5th grade level. 14% of Americans cannot read at all. So it is frightening when you think that there's, that many people, millions of people in the United States that cannot read.
Okay. So to name this a crisis, this is not, it's not magnifying that it really is. Illiteracy in North Carolina is definitely an issue, it sounds like.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is real, and it is so important for those of us who have the ability to offer up some help if we can.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how Fayetteville Urban Ministry works.
Well, the particular program that Alice and I are a part of is called the Adult Literacy Program. And when people have decided that they are ready for some help, and this is a huge, huge step for them, they come to Fayetteville Urban Ministry, they walk in off the street, and they talk with one of our staff members who then schedules an intake for them.
Okay.
And an intake, what that involves is one of our staff members sits down with them and gets to know them, gets some basic information, and then some assessments are given to them so that we can decide about what level that they are on. Those people then spend some time on the computer. And on the computer, they use a program called Lexia. And Lexia reminds them and teaches them, if they've not ever learned, the basics like vowel sounds and consonant blends, all those kinds of things. And after they spend those 6 hours, they've gotten a good review. And they are then placed with a tutor who has also been through tutor training, and they start meeting twice a week.
Okay, wonderful. So you had mentioned that this is kind of a big deal to them. Alice, I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about what makes this kind of a big deal for folks?
Well, people are embarrassed that they cannot read.
Okay.
Some of them go to great lengths to disguise the fact and hide the fact that they can't read. Some even have spouses that don't know they can't read. When they come through that door, it's a big step. It's kind of like they've come through, they've stepped up to the plate, and they're at the bat.
Okay.
They get a tutor, and that tutor's job is to pitch them a ball at their speed, their level, the right spin, and do it over and over until they can hit that ball out of the park.
Okay, very good. Well, Risa, tell us, how is it that we can help?
Well, Fayetteville Urban Ministries Adult Literacy Program can always use new tutors. We have training opportunities probably 4 to 5 times a year.
Okay.
Our newest opportunity will be in June. There are 2 days in June. I believe they start on the 19th. And those are 2-day teaching sessions where someone is trained for 12 hours. And they are then, you can go anywhere in the country with this training. It is
that's fantastic.
Done through Pro-Literacy. And you can find us at 701 Whitfield Street in Fayetteville, or if you would prefer, you can go to Fayetteville Urban Ministry, just in Google, and find us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for what you do to help folks learn how to read, and thank you both so much for being a part of Everyday Grace TV.
Thank you,
Thank
Mary.
you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Next up, we'll talk to Ashley Graney from Read and Feed.
Welcome back to Everyday Grace TV. I'm Jay Locklear, and joining us now is Ashley Graney from Read and Feed. Ashley, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. One of the things that we do as we interview guests on the show is we share with them some questions. We go out into the streets and we ask folks questions, and so whenever we have our interview guests, we like to share the same questions with them. So I'm going to start with this one. What was the last book that you read?
The most recent book that I have read was called Marmee and Me, and it was about Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women. Quite interesting.
The other question that we share with folks out on the streets, and this will kind of move us closer to talking some about Read and Feed, but how is reading important to you?
Well, I think it is exponentially important. It helps us in a multitude of facets in our life when it comes to academics and when it comes to just daily job duties. I mean, reading is a component in so many avenues. So I think that it's really important that people are excellent readers.
So Ashley, I want to take an opportunity now to kind of talk about Read and Feed. So share with us the history of the program, how it got started, and the kind of work that Read and Feed does.
Sure, absolutely. So the program started in 2006, and since then it has grown to the point where we have approximately 20 sites that we work at. The concept in theory is quite simple. We read with the children and then we feed them. However, what you get out of the program is so much more than that, because we're able to really get to grow with them as they kind of process through the program and filter through the program. And we see them grow as not only readers, but as individuals. So you really find self-worth in it as well by participating in the program.
One of the things that I thought was interesting when we were on the Read and Feed website looking at the program, doing some research, that you guys have programs that go through the school year but also into the summer. So this is not just, hey, we want to help you guys do well in school. This is something that helps them become readers all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really want it to be where you become a mentor for that individual child. So we do ask for a commitment from the volunteers so that the kids are seeing the same people repeatedly. That it's not just you kind of popping in and then heading out, where you get to know them, and as I said before, you really get to kind of grow with them as readers and children.
So I want you to take an opportunity now and walk us through what a typical Read and Feed session might look like.
Yeah, so we arrive on site, and while we're there, we start to read. We pick high interest books that are still at grade level, so they're ones that the kids might need a little bit of help with, and you kind of sit there and you discuss the book with them, and you go through and you read, and then after that, we feed them. It's normally a healthy alternative meal. A lot of our sites get the food from another local nonprofit that works with Read and Feed, and they provide the meals. So we're not actually creating the meals on the RVs or at the sites. We're bringing the food in that's healthy and then serving it to them. When that's completed, we still get to sit there with the children and talk about the book that we have just read. So it really kind of shows that we can make reading part of our everyday language. You know, it's not something that is just you do in school, that it really goes beyond that.
I imagine that you guys probably work in partnership with the schools to find out information about where it is that you can be of service. So how do you all work with Wake County Schools?
So the Wake County teachers are who actually put the list together of the students that they recommend for the program. Now the children with their parents still have to go through an application process, but that is ultimately how they get involved in the program. So we do work very closely with the schools to kind of select these children that are already having some maybe difficulty or deficiency in the academic setting at school.
Tremendous. Read and Feed seems like it touches on so many aspects of a child's educational life. Obviously literacy, but building their self-esteem, teaching them the importance of reading, but then it even goes beyond that, working with the parents, obviously feeding them. Just a tremendous program. So here's what I want you to do, Ashley. I want you to look at this camera, and I want you to take an opportunity and tell folks who are watching how they can get involved with Read and Feed.
Yes, so the first place to start is at readandfeed.org, which is our website. You can go there, and there's a link at the top that says volunteer, and then it really kind of takes you through that whole process on how to get involved. Tutoring is one aspect, but there's an avenue, there's a multitude of avenues that you can take. So it's not just tutoring. You can work in administrative aspects at the office. You can help with book drives. If you want to just donate money, that's an option too, and you can do that. That will be gladly accepted. So there's a lot of options that you have to really get involved in this program.
Fantastic. Ashley, thank you so much for being with us on the show today. We've been talking with Ashley Graney, who's a volunteer with Read and Feed. Up next is Belton Joyner.
Welcome back to Everyday Grace TV, where we are joined again by Belton Joyner, our resident biblical storyteller. Belton, thank you so much for being with us.
Getting to be a good habit.
I think so too.
Good to have you, Belton.
Thanks.
So Belton, I want to ask you a question that we've been asking folks here and out on the streets in North Carolina. What is the last book that you read?
Mary, Jay, ladies and gentlemen, I have a surprise for you.
Okay.
I have here a list of every book I have read since I finished school.
Oh, goodness.
You can see they're on index cards because computers hadn't been invented when I finished school. But I got in this habit of the first book I finished after I graduated, I wrote it down and dated it, and I've done it ever since. So I can tell you the last book I read. I can also tell you what I read on October the 16th, 1981, if you'd like to know. But it's all here.
What a wonderful record.
That's 1,000. There's another 1,000, and that's what's left. So that's 2,300, 400. There's 10 to a page. So that's the last book I read, you ask. Excuse me, I strayed a little. The last book was called The Wit and Wisdom of Lee Kuan Yew. Interestingly enough, written by Lee Kuan Yew. He was the first prime minister, and for 30-some years, of Singapore when it became an independent nation.
Okay.
And I knew nothing about Singapore except it had a reputation of being kind of a rigid society. And I was curious to see the man who helped shape it, what he'd have to say. So I downloaded that book and off we went. Yeah.
So looking at this rather large stack of index cards with these books on it, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask, how is reading important to your life?
Jay, I think I would say it's part of who I am. It's relationship. It is communication. It's my chance to go places I would not otherwise go, with people with whom I would otherwise not be.
Sure.
Yeah.
And have the opportunity to meet ideas I otherwise would not meet. They might be a little frightening, a little safe at a distance if I'm reading it, instead of someone yelling in my face. So, in that sense, it's a way in which I become who I am.
Belton, as you heard the folks from Fayetteville Urban Ministry tell us, approximately 24% of the people in North Carolina are reading at the 5th grade level or lower. Yes. I found that really surprising. And I think one of the reasons I found it so surprising is I recently had an opportunity to attend the Religious Communicators Conference where we talked about religious literacy. And one of the things we talked about in defining religious literacy is that folks are not spending time learning about other religions, spending time reading the Bible and learning the Bible. And I wanted to ask you today, what do you think the impact is in the United States of what I hate to say might be religious illiteracy?
Yeah, I think you heard something that's real, because I heard someone say that not to read is no different than not being able to read. You end up with the same result in both cases. And translators of the Bible, it varies from translation to translation, but most of them target about an 8th, 10th grade reading level. And if people are reading at a 5th grade level, there are a lot of people who have some reading skill, but the biblical material is going to be, what's that about? You know, it's going to make it very difficult. What we miss when we do not encounter the scriptures, of course, is that we're left to measure ourselves by ourselves rather than by an insight revealed from God, that God says you're called to be this. But if I don't encounter that somewhere along the way, then I am left to say, well, I'm like this person or like that person. But there's no basis of comparison to what God has created us to be. So, you know, I'm not saying that you have to be able to read the Bible in order to be considered a child of God. Of course not, I'm not saying that.
Right.
But God created us for relationships. And the way the story is told in Genesis is that God said it's not good for a person to be alone. You know, the Adam and Eve story, humankind and life giver, those words mean that. It's the story of all of us, the story of relationships, created for relationship, which means created for communication. And communication's one way we express our humanity. So we're shaped differently if we've not been exposed to the scripture.
So in this talking about relationship and communication, it sounds like that the Bible can teach us then, if we're willing to read it, engage it, it teaches us then how to be in relationship with one another, but also with God.
Let me put it this way, Jay, and take another look at the place in the Bible to find something about how God's self has chosen to communicate with us and how we communicate with others. The gospel writer of John over in the New Testament says something about that. He says that it's really powerful. He said in the first chapter of the gospel according to John, in that account, he said that the Word, that is what God had to say, the Word, became flesh and dwelt among us and lived among us or tented among us. That's a way of saying that God had something to say to us, and it came in human form, Jesus Christ. God said, I love you. And that message came in human form. Our love needs to be lived, and that's true whether we can read or not. Our love ultimately must become lived.
And real.
And real in that way.
Incarnate.
Incarnate, that's a good word for it.
Well, do you think that at this point that we can regain our religious literacy in the United States, and if so, how?
Well, I want to coin a phrase. Everyday grace. How's that?
Yeah. I like that one.
I think what we saw earlier when we had the interviews with other guests are examples of everyday grace. In everyday life, where God's grace is coming through programs that are enabling us to become better equipped to read, better equipped for relationships, therefore, better equipped for communication. So I think the kinds of programs we've described here, and when people of faith take seriously, getting it so that everybody else can meet the sacred text of that faith, then I think we've made some progress toward it. And that by supporting programs, and had some ways mentioned here that you could support those programs.
Sure.
I think that's one way, taking seriously the fact, recognizing that everybody doesn't read, and making it available to people. Public library, there are neighborhood libraries now where they're just boxes of books put out and people come by and they take one out, they read it and they put it back and take another one. You know, they exchange neighborhood books that way.
Yeah.
Homeschooling groups who put their books together in a church somewhere perhaps, and so they all have access to variety. There's a variety of ways we can make that expand a bit, I think.
Yeah. We talked to our guest, Fayetteville Urban Ministries, their adult literacy program, Read and Feed. These are folks who they have committed to teach other folks how to read, teaching folks to learn how to read. And so how is it that, like the work that those organizations are doing, as people of faith, what can we do to encourage, to grow that religious literacy?
I think we're all illiterate about something.
Yeah.
I'm illiterate about how computers work. I can read, but I'm illiterate about computers. I'm not illiterate about basketball, but I know a little something about that. I can figure that out. So when I say someone is illiterate and how we can help them become less so, I want to understand that I'm not saying they are lesser persons.
Of course.
I want to say that they've got gifts of literacy that I don't have.
Right.
Because every one of them brings some gift of grace into my life that I just simply don't have. But if I can bring the gift of reading and exposure to the Scriptures, then I've brought a gift that perhaps I am in a position to bring. And I think that can happen when the church gathers to take the Scriptures seriously, make sure they're read so that people can hear as well as follow with eye, and making sure that there are opportunities for, in smaller, less threatening settings, opportunities to study and explore what the Scripture might mean, and to come back to a way in which a person can say, I'm empty at this spot. Is there something in that would help fill that empty spot? And then those who have traveled there before can say, I've walked down that road. As D.T. Miles said about evangelism, it's one beggar telling another beggar where to find food. And I think in the Scripture, sometimes that's what we are. We're just one beggar telling another beggar where we found something that tasted pretty good.
Belton, thank you so much again for your valuable insights. We are so grateful that you are with us.
Good to be a part of it. Thanks, Jay.
Next up, we have a wonderful opportunity to hear Jay Locklear do some spoken word.
3.
This episode of Everyday Grace was about literacy. And so instead of doing a song like we normally would do, instead we're going to offer a spoken word piece. This is In the Beginning Was the Word. To start at the beginning means to start with the Word that was present before the world began. The Word that was, according to John, first, present to God, was in readiness for God, was in fact God. In the beginning was the Word, says the Gospel. In the beginning God created, says Genesis. Genesis and Gospel bringing together two halves of the whole story, proclaiming truth in all of its glory. In the beginning, from the beginning, this Word was involved. No mere observer sitting quietly in the auditorium of the universe. The Word spoke into the void, forming and shaping everything that would be, casting light into darkness, separating water from sky, growing the first trees and plants, filling the seas, the skies, and the land with all manner of creatures. The Gospel again, what came into existence was life, and the life was light to live by. This life light blazed in the darkness, and the darkness couldn't put it out. The Word delved into the dirt and clay and made a man in the image of the Word, and then breathed life into the man, this man, the first man, so that he would not be lonely. The Word made for the man a woman, also in the image of the Word, and then breathed life into the woman. And all of this, light and sky, plants and trees, fish and fowl, man and woman, all of this work of the Word was good. There was more Word work to be done. The Word continued to speak, calling Noah, Abraham, and Moses. The Word came to Samuel in the dead of night, once, twice, 3 times, calling until he answered. The Word called forth kings and queens, David and Esther, to rule over the nations. The Word spoke to prophets and through prophets, leading God's people, the people of the Word, back to their first love. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and then silence. There were no words. Where was the Word? Where was the Word that had spoken so loudly, so strongly? Where? And then the Word spoke again, not with a shout or a trumpet blast, but the cry of a baby, born to a virgin and laid in a manger. The baby became a child who grew in both body and spirit, blessed by both God and people. He continued to grow, now a child, now a youth, now a man. And his name he was called Jesus, Emmanuel, Son of the Most High. This was the Word, manifest, incarnate, God with skin right in our midst. The The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. We saw the glory with our own eyes, the one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous inside and out, true from start to finish. Now the Word called in a new voice, inviting fishermen to follow, speaking words of healing, raising the dead to life, teaching, preaching, bringing the kingdom of God to earth. And just like when the Word spoke the world into being, it was good. But there were those who sought to silence the Word. They tried. Oh, how they tried. They did their dead level best to quiet the Word. Captured, chained, crowned with thorns, and crucified on a cross, the Word was lifted up for all to see, silenced once and for all. Or so they thought. Even on the cross, when the light gave way to darkness, when the end seemed nearest, still the Word spoke. And what did the Word say? What could the Word possibly say? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And still the Word spoke, offering life while staring into the very face of death, offering life to a thief, no less. And then, finally, offering the last of His life, He spoke again, loudly, placing His life into His Father's hands, and breathed His last. Or so they thought. 1 day, 2 days, then 3, and then as if going back to the beginning, light broke forth from darkness, the darkness of the tomb, and the Word spoke again, telling Mary to go and tell the others that He was alive, telling His disciples, gathered in fear in an upper room, to be at peace, telling the world with a shout of Easter triumph that the Word, who was from the dawn of time, is now alive and will be forevermore. In the beginning was the Word, says the Gospel, but I tell you, in the Word is the beginning. In the Word we continue. In the Word we will find our final victory over death and hell. The Word became flesh and blood, moved into the neighborhood. We saw the glory with our own eyes, the one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous inside and out, true from start to finish.